All right, we're in ninth grade lit, and this is the prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Middle English.
One that April with his shore sword, the draught of March, hath pierced to the road, and bathed every vine in sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. One severus egg with his sweat breath, in spirit hath in every heart and head the tender croppers, and the young son hath in the ram his half course run, and smaller ballers maken melodie, that slepen al the nicht with open ear. So pricketh him nature in here courages, than longing folk to go on pilgrimages. And Palmer's forsaken strongest rundes, to fena howes, coof in sundry Londres, and specially from every sheerest end of England to Canterbury thy wind. The holy blissful martyr forsake, that him hath holden one that thy was sake.
All right, that's the whole thing. A minute 16, and he talks really slow, so you'll probably do it faster than that. Let's just listen to the first 12 again.
One that April with his shore sword, the draught of March, hath pierced to the road, and bathed every vine in sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. One severus egg with his sweat breath, in spirit hath in every heart and head the tender croppers, and the young son hath in the ram his half course run, and smaller ballers maken melodie, that slepen al the nicht with open ear. So pricketh him nature in here courages, than longing folk to go on pilgrimages. And
So that's all you're doing for tomorrow. Let's practice it a couple of times.
Isn't it due Thursday?
Thursday. All right, so I'll start it, and you can follow along. One that April with his shower sota, the drought of March had pierced to the rota, and bathed every vine in which liquor, of which virtue engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus eat with his sweet of breath, in spirit hath in every hope and hath the tender crops, and the younger son hath in the round his house of course Irana. And small and fowls making melody, that sleeping through all the nick with open e. So pricketh him nature in her courages, then longing folk to go on pilgrimage. Let's do that last part again. And you can look at it, but you got to memorize it eventually. And smally fowlies making, let's do it together. And smally fowlies making melodia, that sleeping all the nick with open ear. So pricketh him nature in her courages, then longing folk to go on pilgrimages. I usually say it wrong. I usually say through instead of all. And so pricketh him nature her, I leave out the end. If I were grading myself, I'd have to take out, like 0.7 points for that. You don't care probably if you make 100 or 97. You want to make 100. You want to get every word exactly right. I've just kind of memorized it in a way, and so I got to make sure I got it right. Let's do it one more time from the top, okay? One that April with her shower sota, the drought of March had pierced to the rota, and bathed every vine in switched liquor, of which virtue engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus seek with his sweet of breath, in spirit hath in every hope and hath the tender properties, and the younger son hath in the round his house of course Irana. And smaller fowls making melodia, that sleeping all the nick with open ear. So pricketh him nature in her courages, long and full to go on pilgrimages. You don't seem as confident about that last part.
It's like that.
It's like weird,
Yeah,
because they don't look like crickets. Like the other ones kind of look like
Well,
they
they
sound.
started the same too. One did April, one did Zephyrus, one Zephyr, but this is different, so make sure you get it, yeah. Yeah.
What do those lines mean, like,
It's like a continuation.
Okay.
what are the lines mean?
Oh, I just marked, the lines at the end of it, I guess that's how it was printed, they're punctuation marks. They're like dashes or something like that. Well, good job. We'll leave it at that. We'll do that on Thursday. Please get out, just for a few minutes, get out the Peace Child. I want to read a couple of passages from there. My book has different page numbers than your book. So I'm going to have to ask you to cooperate with me. Let me make sure you got your book out here. Just open it up. Okay, I'm asking you to go to chapter, I think it's going to be page 80 something, but it's chapter 7. Look about 2 pages in, and I'm going to ask you to look for this sentence. The wildness of the locale seems to taunt me. Yeah. Okay. Then you probably need to go back and get it.
What is
I
it?
think you passed that earlier when you went down there. Yeah.
Shots fired.
Hey guys, we don't need to. Yeah, we just don't, yeah, it is your thing. Ooh. We still-
Sorry.
What's that sentence?
I'm looking for the wildness of the locale. Seems to haunt.
I didn't have mine.
What is it? All right, top page 83. All right, I'm gonna read some of this for you, so I'll let you read the prologue to me today. I'm gonna read some of this to you. The wildness of the locale seemed to taunt me. Something in the mood of the place seemed to say mockingly, I am not like your tame, manageable Canadian homeland. I am tangled. I am too dense to walk through. I am hot and steamy and drenched with rain. I am hip-deep mud and 6-inch sago thorn. I am death adders and taipan and leeches and crocodiles. I am malaria and dysentery and filariasis and hepatitis. Your ideal means nothing here. Your Christian gospel has never scrupled the conscience of my children. You think you love them, but wait until you know them, if you can ever know them. You presume you are ready to grapple with me. Guys, you try to follow along here. You think you love them, but wait till you know them, if you can know them. You presume you are ready to grapple with me, understand my mysteries and change my nature. But I am easily able to overpower you with my gloom, my remoteness, my heedless brutality, my indolence, my unashamed morbidity, my total darkness. Think again before you commit yourself to certain disillusionment. Can't you see I am no place for your wife? I am no place for your son. I am no place for you. So this reminds me of Merton's Cathedral, when he personified the temptations and they would try to talk to, think about it. God communicates us, not through images, but through words, the Word of God. Well, guess what? The devil does the same thing. He talks to us. Mentally, we don't hear his voice. We don't hear the literal voice of God in terms of audible. But Satan also talks to us through our thoughts. And Louis, I don't know what that watch, I don't know what's all on it, but that's the new technology for me, but you really need to not be distracted by that. So anyway, Satan can tempt us that way by talking to him. I need this, I want this, I need to do this. This is his response. Skip down a paragraph. It's only a bluff, I thought. This wilderness also is part of my Father's creation. His providence can sustain us here as well as anywhere else. Then the peace of God descended on me, and suddenly this strange place became home, my home. I turned to Ken and John and said, this is where I want to build. You know, we're here to kind of help, work on your intellect. The sports, they work on your body. Church works on your spirit. We actually try to do all three here. But just think of the value of a strong intellect. If Satan is tempting you to do something you shouldn't do, your mind kicks in, if it's trained, and he began to now think of the same wilderness that seemed to be taunting him. You think you're going to change these people. You don't have a chance. And then suddenly he thought of, God made this place. They're telling me this is the worst place on earth. But God made it. There's no place God can't penetrate, no darkness He can't overcome. All right, so the wilderness is taunting him. Turn to page, the end of the chapter, 2 pages from the end of the same chapter. Our confidence in God was running high. It's going to be this is page 106. It's going to be 91 or something, I think.
91.
All right, thank you. All right, so our confidence in God this is when we're getting close to determining where they were going to live and all. Our confidence in God was running at a high level and getting higher. Exhilarated with a buoyant spirit of trust, we never seriously considered that some dread disease of the swamps might steal the blush of health from our baby's cheeks, or that any other danger might seriously threaten any of us. If God be for us, who can be against us, was the watchword that uplifted us day and night. And I promise you, the best way to deal with temptation is with Scripture. That was one of the things that was tempting him not to go here. I got a baby. Now we're crazy. We don't want to endanger that baby. I'll read on. It seemed furthermore that this bracing excitement was not our own, but was being communicated to us through the presence of God, as if God Himself had been waiting such a long, long time to do whatever He was going to do for the Sawleys through us, and was delighted that at last the time had come. It had never occurred to me before that God could feel excited, that the one who is omnipresent in time as well as space could actually, as it were, isolate part of His consciousness on a single world line and anticipate the future as if He were not already experiencing it. So he's personifying God, like we do. We anticipate something. Well, God knows everything, but he said in some ways he could imagine God being excited for what's about to happen. He'd been waiting for it forever. God had. Of course, God forever is all one, past, present, future. He says, it is true, God is excited, and we, like children, are getting excited along with our parents' contagious joy. This intuition only served to heighten still further our eager expectation of whatever God was preparing for us and for the Sawleys. I don't know how many of us associate God and church and doing God's work outside the church with excitement. Who gets excited about that? Well, there is no greater excitement. It has to be, because it's God's excitement. And so when we're involved directly in doing work for God, ministry, there's an excitement there that you will experience someday. If you do it, maybe you already have. All right, so turn to, again, this would be chapter 11, about 2 pages in. I think it's around page 120, maybe 118, something like that. Presently, shouting became chanting. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's on 218, middle of the page.
Okay. It's 118, did you say?
Yeah,
118. All right, presently the shouting became chanting. The leaping gave way to dancing. These are the natives that were responding to them. Wave after wave of warriors swirled closer as if to engulf us. It's like a baptism, I thought, a baptism of primitive spirit, of contagiousness. Suddenly, in the blue glow of twilight, a presence stronger than the presence of the multitude enveloped us. The same presence that had first drawn us to trust in Christ and then wooed us across continents and oceans to this very jungle clearing. Before that presence, every superficial thought and feeling fled away, and I felt a deep probe go into my motive. Missionary, he was asking, why are you here? I was asking. It was a question I had often fielded from the lips of unbelievers. Now my Lord was asking it. There was no escape from the question. The eyes of every sorry dancer seemed to ask it. Their voice seemed to chant it. Their drums to echo it. And then look at the bottom, this prayer that he prays. Lord Jesus, it is for you we stand here, immersed not in water, but in sorry humanity. This is our baptism into the work you anticipated for us before creation. Keep us faithful and power us with your Spirit. May your will be done among these people as it is in heaven. And if any good comes to them through us, the honor is yours. And he replied, the peace of God which passes all understanding shall garrison your hearts and minds through Christ. So I think we've seen that. As dangerous as it is, and as strange as it is, he often feels a peace, a literal feeling of peace. I'd love to hear if any of you've ever had that experience. a extremely real feeling of the presence of God. He doesn't operate that way all the time. I don't have it all the time, but I remember those times when I do, and whether I have it or not, I know he's there, yes.
Like when I was in England, like a couple of years ago, like we were outside like Westminster Abbey, and it was like just when like there was like the Brexit stuff, like with them leaving the EU and stuff. So there's like 40,000 people who were there like rioting and stuff that were coming up, and so I was like super nervous because like I was younger and stuff. And then like once we got in the church and we were like in there like having the tour and stuff, like I felt like a lot safer and stuff, and I felt like I was like at peace.
You were witnessing history, John, and that was pretty significant time in England. Well, yeah, that's the kind of thing. Thank you for sharing that. And one last thing, I'm not going to read all of this, but anyways, it's chapter 15, about two pages in. It's 174, so it's maybe 160, 155, somewhere in that range. This is chapter 15. And you're looking for, basically, there were two suppositions. Nearer the beginning than the end of chapter. What is it?
148.
148. Right. But this is the last thing I'll read about the religion of the Salaries. Basically, there were two presuppositions I shared with the Salaries. Belief in a supernatural world and the importance of interaction between that supernatural world and men. So they believed in the supernatural. And they believed there was interaction between themselves, men, humans, and the supernatural. That the Salaries believed in a hierarchy of disinterested, what does that mean? Disinterested, yes.
Non-biased, not having anything else going on.
Right, so their gods, if we want to call them that, they didn't have any interest. They were unbiased. They weren't for or against. It says that if they were disinterested, if not malicious. So they may have been, they were either neutral or malicious or evil. They weren't good. That's definitely something they weren't. They were demons and departed spirits of the dead. I trusted in an infinite yet personal God who loves justice and mercy. So instead of that, that's what they believed. They believed God cared for people and that he believed in justice. The Salaries were convinced that no misfortune happened by accident, but was invariably caused by demons who could be either activated or restrained by witchcraft. So they believed that these demons didn't do anything good for people. They did bad, and if anything bad happened, they caused it. And the only way to prevent it was to know witchcraft. So you could kind of control it. Remember, what did it say up here? They made it sound like they could control the demons through witchcraft. But what does it say here? It says, he will not permit the righteous to be moved. We believe that God is the one who permits, allows, or doesn't permit, or doesn't allow things to happen. Not people and not the demons. That God is over people and demons. And if anything happens, it's because he made it happen or allowed it to happen. Instead of witchcraft, Christians use what? And prayer, right. We don't use spells. We don't use witchcraft. We have a Bible and we have prayer. That's how we directly, somehow, in the mystery of it, we influence God. I don't understand that because God does what he wants to do, and yet he's granted us the ability to somehow influence circumstances through prayer. And then look at the bottom. I laid out a few notes on the mat in front of me and stared at it. And started in, First, I coined a name for God in Sawi, Meo Kadon, the greatest spirit. Then I tried to describe him. I explained that he didn't live in just one submerged log or one sago palm like Sawi Hamars, but instead filled the whole sky and the earth. So the Sawis believed that these demons, they lived in the river, they lived in a tree, and he was trying to tell them, no, God doesn't live in rivers and trees. He well, let me just show you what he says. In fact, we're sitting inside him right now. They looked around involuntarily, startled at the thought. In the case of Hamars, you use witchcraft to keep them from entering your villages, your homes, your very bodies. But there is no charm, no fetish that can keep Meo Kadon away. He respects no witchcraft. He is everywhere, and no one can ever get away from him. You know, it's in English here, but he's speaking in Sawi. We talked about the language yesterday. He's telling them about God in their language. What does that remind you of? The day of Pentecost, when all the apostles were speaking different languages to different people. If you were Greek, you were hearing Greek. If you were Italian, you were hearing Italian, whatever. And a look of defenselessness crossed their faces. And because everything, the sun, the moon, and the weather, rivers, jungle, animals, and people are all inside him, he knows all about everything. He knows what everyone is saying, doing, and thinking. We cannot see him, but he sees us. He controls everything, just as easily as you control the movements of your muscles. Without him, the wind cannot blow, nor the rain fall. The sun cannot shine, nor the moon rise without his power. Neither could plants grow, nor babies be conceived without his provision. So, just want to help that to deepen your understanding of what his task was and his efforts to try to get them to believe in God and not in their spirits. Of course, we know that no human being does that. None of us have the ability to save somebody else or get them to understand the gospel. That has to be a work of Jesus. But somehow he's given us the privilege of being a part of that by doing the talking, and then God uses our words to change people. So that's something I'd just like for you to note. If you see places like that in the reading that you can particularly moves you or you think is significant, let us know, and we'd like to read it. So we're on page 17, and we're going to read about the reed. The reed, that's not possible. I guess the plowman, that would be it. At the bottom of the page. That's where we are. Where it says there was a reeve, a miller. Why don't we start with Aiden? And if you'll read about the plowman. The last thing we looked at was the parson. And there's a comparison between the plowman and the parson. Now, we don't need to read about the plowman. We just did that. But what is that connection?
The brothers.
The plowman and the parson. We did read that. So I can't hear you. Speak up.
They were like brothers in Christ.
So what does that mean? They're brothers in Christ.
Like they were really honest together, so their name, both loved God.
Okay.
Studied together, so.
They're good friends.
Friends?
They're good friends, or like very just relatives, so they just goes to church.
Yeah, it could be any of those. And they all apply. They all could be true. All right, so we're gonna start with Aiden. He's gonna read, there was a Reeve and a Miller, and we're gonna define those things. So, there was a Reeve, also a Miller.
There was a reeve, also a miller, there were college manciples from the ends of court, apple gardener, and a close consort, a church court summoner, writing at a trot. And finding myself, that was a lot.
All right, we need to define those. A Reeve is someone who works on an estate. You need to define these. He works on an estate as a steward. A steward is somebody who oversees the daily business of the estate. An estate meaning a farm with lands and crops and workers. And he runs the show. He's kind of the manager of it.
What was the definition?
It's a steward. A steward is somebody who supervises the daily working on a farm or an estate.
Kind of like your man.
But that's his job. On a private estate, he is a steward. A steward is the manager or supervisor of all those things. A miller, what does a miller do? He works in a mill. What happens at mills?
There's like a bunch of different things.
Well, what were you gonna say, Phil? All right, so they grind grain in order to make different kinds of meal or flour. A manciple does the same thing as a reeve, except at a college. Are you getting this, Sean?
Yeah. A reed.
All right, a manciple does the same thing as a reeve.
Like a steward of a college.
Of a college. Instead of the manciple works at a college, the reeve works on an estate. But they both are stewards. They manage the business affairs. And finally, a summoner. Summoner works for the ecclesiastical courts or the church courts. And his job is to summon people. Do you know what that means?
Called.
Yeah. And you will be called, you will be summoned at least once in your life to jury duty. Hopefully you never have to go to court for any other reason. But when you get the summons in the mail, because it's a summons, it's a legal, I wouldn't even call it a request. They're not asking you to come, they're telling you to come. You cannot ignore a summons. Well, you can. You'll find out what happens. I don't really know what happens, although I know what could happen. They say that if you ignore the jury summons, they could send a sheriff's deputy to pick you up and bring you. In fact, once you're inside the courtroom, a judge he's almost like the captain of a ship. You know, he's almost like the god of the ship or the god of he can do anything he wants to. Now, he can't abuse his power, but he could put a juror in jail because the juror wasn't behaving right. He could put one of the people out watching the trial. He could literally handcuff him and put him in jail. A judge has that much power. It's very scary to be around that kind of power. And so a summons is that one time in your life, hopefully it's just one, but when you get it, you've got to respond to it. You just can't ignore it. Yes.
What's the summoner?
He summons people, which requires people to come to court for various purposes. Either as a witness, maybe as a plaintiff or not a plaintiff, but as a defendant. Maybe you've been accused of a crime, or as a juror. But you've got to respond to it. Yeah. All right. That's what a summoner does. So, yeah.
Can you miss it if you have something really, really important going on?
Say that one
You
more
can
time.
reschedule.
Like if you're.
What did you say?
Can you miss it if you look at a medical?
But you have to respond to it. You have to, in advance, they tell you, if you have a problem with this, like you're going to have a baby, you can appeal to the court. There's a procedure to go through. Sometimes, one time I just showed up for the jury summons, and I knew there was a mistake, because it had my address and my son's name. So it had he's the third and I'm a junior, but it had my address. Those two didn't go together, so I just showed it to the lady there and she said, okay, you can go home. But I've had to serve on 2 juries, which was very interesting, but it's time consuming. They were both civil cases. They weren't criminal cases. Nobody got sent to jail. But they're fascinating to just be, what little I know about courtrooms is because I've had to sit in them on several occasions, and I don't like it. And that's why I admire lawyers, because they do this for a living. But it is one of the most intimidating places on earth, because you know what goes on there could affect you considerably. And I have a great deal of respect for the court of law. But yeah, you can get out of it, you just can't ignore it. And you have to go through the proper procedures. I think what they do, frankly, is to be called for jury duty, they take people that pay property taxes, so people that own property, that's how they get their list. You just have to be 18. I was on a jury once, we had an 18-year-old. He didn't own any property, and he got called as a juror and served. And he was a senior or just graduated from college or high school. Anybody who want to be a lawyer? I admire lawyers. I could never do the job because I don't enjoy reading law. That's a special kind of reading. I wouldn't enjoy that, but I admire them. So let's go to the Miller, and I guess we could go to Ben there. Yeah.
Do any of these people have like attributes about them that we have to write about or no?
Yeah, because he's going to describe each one of them. Yeah, all of them are going to be described. That wasn't true with the haberdasher and those people. There were about 5 of them. We don't know anything about them except their jobs, but we will get a description here.
For 20, we have to like describe all the people and then say how they relate to the program. Are we gonna do that later?
No, we're going to do it right now. What's the first name on that list?
The cook.
Okay, we've talked about the cook and I don't know who else is on the list.
It's like a lot of people, we have to describe like how they, like relate to the program.
All right, so at some point, we've done that. Everybody that we've had a description for, we've talked about. Either what they were wearing or their character, what their job meant. So you do need to know that question. It's question 20. I just got tired of writing the question. I just lumped it all into one place. There are 30 pilgrims, but you're not going to need to know more than about, I think that was mine. You're not going to need to know more than about 15 at most. It might even be less than that or fewer than that. All right, so one of those will be the Miller. He's a very interesting person. So Ben, we got 15 minutes. We'll see what we can read.
The Miller was The Miller was a chap of 16 stone, a great stout fellow, big and brown and bellow. He did well out of them, for he could go and win the ram at any wrestling show. Broad, naughty, and short-shouldered he was both. He could heave any door off hinge and post, or take a run and break it with his head. His beard, like any sow or fox, was red, and broad as well as thought it were a spade, and at its very tip his nose displayed a wart on which there stood a tuft of hair, red as the bristles in an old sow's ear. His nostrils were as black as they were wide. He had a sword and buckler at his side. His mighty mouth was like a furnace door. A wrangler and buffoon, he had a store of tavern story, filthy in the main. He was a master hand at stealing grain. He felt it with his thumb, and thus he knew its quality, and took 3 times his due. A thumb of gold, by God, to gouge an oak. He wore a hood of blue and a white coat. He liked to play his bagpipes up and down, and liked that how he brought us out of town.
There's 6 or 7 things about him. What are some of them? Yes, Sarah.
He was strong and big and he was a good wrestler.
Right. he loved to fight. He's a bar fighter. He'd go in a bar and invariably get into a fight, usually win. If he's not too smart, he would try to knock doors down with his head. Yeah.
He stole grain.
He was a miller, so he bought grain and he sold meal and flour, right? So he would cheat the people that he was buying from or the people he was selling to. It says he would put his thumb, was that it, on the scale? It's an old trick, you know, here's this scale hanging there and he's putting the grain in, but his thumb is over here, nobody sees it, it's making it look, okay, that says it's 1.5 pounds, it's not really, maybe
At the
3/4
airport-
of a pound.
At the airport, when you lift the thing up with your foot, so that your bag doesn't weigh as much.
Well, that would be the same principle.
That's just you then.
What else? So he's a cheater, he's a brawler, he's a bagpipe player, what else is he?
Some knowing was.
Oh.
Yeah.
It says he is like boastful.
Yeah. And I would add one other thing, that's probably enough except for this. He liked to tell, he calls it filthy or dirty stories, you know, obscene stories. We will not read his story, the miller. And I don't know if you'd call it obscene, it's not that bad, but it's certainly not the kind of thing you would probably read in a classroom. So, anyway, I've read it. That's the miller. Let's go to the manciple, Luke.
A manciple came from the inner temple. All players might follow his example. And behind vigils, he never rash, whether he bought on credit or paid cash. He used to watch the market more precisely and got in first. And so he did quite nicely. Now isn't it a marvel of God's grace that that an illiterate fellow can outpace the wisdom of a heap of learned men? His masters he had more than 30. Then all person obstrusted legal knowledge could have been produced if a dozen from their college, fit to be stewards and land and rents and game. To any pure in England we could name and show him how to live on what he had debt free, or be frugal as he might desire, and make them fit to help about the shark. In any legal case there was the shrub, and yet there this manciple is quite thereon.
So what do we know about the manciple? You know what he does, we define that, what do we know about it? So already give me one thing about it.
He was illiterate, is that one? No?
What does that mean?
Can't read.
Or right.
Or right, yeah.
So let's think about that. He runs the business affairs of a college, that's educational institution. And yet he can't read or write. So was he very good at what he did?
No.
Yes.
Was he?
Yes.
Well, if he had his job, then he probably was.
Well, that's a good point, but we know that he's good at what he does because the, Chaucer tells us, what does he say about it? It's toward the end of that.
In any legal case, there was tried against this manciple good wife thereof.
He could like make like with his words, he could get them.
That in the literate fellow can outpace the wisdom and think of a learned man.
Right, so, the college has graduates, and the college graduates go on to be people like him, stewards. And it said he's better than the graduates of the college. And you to get in college, I think it's still a requirement in order to be admitted to a college, you have to be able to read and write. I still think that's one of the criteria. I can't imagine of someone who can't read or write in any era be admitted to a college. Not only could he not go to college, but he's better than any of the people that graduate from the college. I just think that's remarkable. That's the thing I remember about the manciple, is that particular detail. though he can't read or write, he's actually, we don't have time too much for this, but have you known anybody, either known personally or known of, who didn't go to college and yet was very successful in their field? Most people start with LeBron James. We'll get him off the, I should point out Michael Jordan did go to college, University of North Carolina. But, can you think of other people? Yeah.
I can think of people I know who don't have like really great grades, but they're just really smart, bright people.
Okay, that's another point. You know, they may be able to read and write, they would go to college, but they're not A students. I've heard actually, George Bush, the president, not junior, but the second George Bush, I think he said, or somebody said about it, the world is run by C students. Now, that's not an encouragement for you to be a C average student, but the fact, it's just a fact, that if many people that don't make the best grades, you can still be extremely successful. Now, I think the work ethic, if you work hard at it, you're gonna probably make good grades. And to me, it's the work ethic as much as anything that makes somebody successful in their job. Yeah.
Booga.
What?
Booga, it's a Fortnite streamer.
He won the
Makes a lot of
Fortnite
money.
World Cup.
He's like,
Surprised I've never heard of him.
Yeah,
He likes he like streams and like.
He's like
watches-
But can he not read or write?
I don't know. Luke.
It's Luke's friend.
that's-
He's like 17 years old and he won like $5 million.
Dude.
On charity.
Take back everything I said about that.
Yeah, Clash Royale.
No, take what I said about not going to school.
Luke's
Anyway, the point is that he's really good at his job. Let's do this quickly, but Carter is going to read about the reed, and we'll finish with him. So listen to the reed. Remember, he does the same job as the Manciple, but for an estate, a farm, rather than a college.
The reed was old and colorate and thin. His beard was shaven closely to the skin. His shorn hair became abruptly to a stop above his ear, and he was dropped on top just like a goose in front. His legs were lean, like sticks they were. No pack was to be seen. He kept his bins and garners very trim. No auditor could gain a point on him. He could judge by watching drought and rain, and the yield he might expect from seeding rain. His master's sheep, his animals and hens, pigs, horses, dairies, stores, and cattle pens were wholly trusted to his government. He had been under contract to present the cows right from his master's earliest years. No one had ever caught him in arrears. No bailiff, serf, or herdsman dared to kick. He knew their dodges, knew their every trick. Feared like the plague he was by those beneath. He had a lovely dwelling on a heath, shadowed and green by trees above the sward. A better hand at bargains than his lord. He had grown rich and had a store of treasure well tucked away. Yet out it came the pleasure of his lord with settled loans or gifts of goods, to earn his thanks and even costs and hoods. When young he learned a useful trade, and still he was a carpenter of first-rate skill. The stallion cob he rode at a slow trot was dapple gray, and bore the name of Scott. He wore an overcoat of bluish shade and rather long. He had a rusty blade slung at his side. He came, as I heard tell, from Norfolk, near a place called Baldwell. His coat was tucked under his belt and splayed. He rode the hindmost of our cavalcade.
You know what a cavalcade is?
What?
Well, think about it. He said he rode hindmost of our cavalcade. So what are they riding?
Horses.
And so it must, and if it's a kind of a line of horses, it's what we would call a parade, or, you know, just a group of horses. It's got the word cavalry in it, which is associated with horses. Cavalry or cavalry, cavalry. I can't hear you.
There's like a saying, it's like, don't fear the cavalry.
So give me something about the reed. There are 7 or 8 things, we just need Sarah.
They had a bluish coat, that was long.
Yeah, to me, they sound a lot like the dwarves in The Hobbit. They all have hoods on and different colors, but, all right, what else can we say about it? Sorry.
They described his legs as sticks,
Which means he's what?
lean, and has no calf.
Which means he's what?
Skinny.
Which means he's what?
Poor.
But
Or
that's
it
not
could
true
be-
in this case.
Oh.
He's not poor.
Anorexic.
It says rich.
He's rich,
Anorexic.
but he doesn't eat like most rich people. He's what do you call it? He's thrifty. He doesn't waste a lot of money on food. What else?
He couldn't be trusted.
Give me something else, Charlotte. And Libby, look for one other thing for me. What? Yeah, Carter's gonna give us one while you're looking.
He's like smart, cause like, he says that he's like good at, with money and stuff.
Very smart, Charlotte.
He's good at bargaining.
Yeah, making deals. The art of the deal.
It says he tucks his money away, so he's very, like, he saves his money,
Yeah.
it seems like. And
Somebody-
he knows how to handle it.
Very good. One interesting, Libby, did you have anything?
No, I was gonna say bargaining.
One interesting thing about him, he's so smart, he's so good with money, that he loans money to his boss. He's doing better than his boss. He has to lend his boss money. That's just one of those interesting things that you see here. He is choleric. I know you don't remember, it's been on the board for a few days, but I erased it yesterday. Choleric means irritated. People are afraid of him. He's never short of money. You know, when he does all the accounting and all the counting of what they have, he always balances his books. I like the Reeves and the Mancibles. And so you need to be, it's never too early, and I will make maybe tomorrow I'll just make the assignment for vocabulary, but we need to be thinking about the test. I mean, we're almost finished with the prologue, and then we have 3 tales, so we've still got this week and next week, but you're gonna have to know the main pilgrims, not all of them, but many of them. Those 2 will be on the list, yeah.
Are we gonna have a test in the prologue? And
The prologue and the 3 tales, so there'll be 4 things that will be tested.
Okay, so they'll be all separate? Or will it be like a big test on?
Big test.
Oh, I didn't know if this would be like a test on prologue.
No. All right, guys, once you're packed up, we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No, next slide.